We all have hobbies. There are things we do for money, and then there are things we genuinely love. Some capture breathtaking photos, some lose themselves in online games at night, and others compose music in their spare time. One of my hobbies is collecting horror stories. Well, not just any horror stories, but the ones that are particularly interesting and well told. It just so happens that many of the most compelling ones fall into the horror genre. I am captivated by the way Black Ops builds its atmosphere, and I'm in awe of how Now You See Me keeps the audience guessing. But, for some reason, stories about the terrifying, the unknown, and the often unexplainable always top my personal favorites list. Why? I'm not entirely sure. Perhaps it's because the narrator sometimes avoids giving clear answers, leaving the mystery unsolved. Or maybe it's because, with a single line, the storyteller shatters the fourth wall, turning what seemed like a simple tale into something deeply unsettling. For a more immersive experience, the setting is key. Read it at night, with the lights off and alone. There is something about the atmosphere that makes it hard to believe that after finishing the story, the protagonist starts getting calls from a number they only saw in a game, or that something strange really did happen during a quiet night shift. But hearing the story firsthand from someone sitting right in front of you, that is a whole different experience. About 2 years ago, I took on a freelance programming job for a client. We only communicated via phone and ICQ at first, but as the project progressed, there were so many questions we decided to meet in person. My client, Mikhail, turned out to be one of those people who initially tries to come across as serious, but quickly drops the act once you make a good impression. We sat in a cafe in the city center, discussing the project, talking about life, people, and how rare it is to find honest workers these days. At one point, I casually mentioned my hobby. For just a moment, I noticed a subtle change in his expression, but he quickly masked it and continued speaking in a light, friendly tone. Only occasionally did I catch him nervously biting his lip, distractedly staring into his tea. Then, after a pause, he decided to speak up. "So, you collect stories?" he asked. "Yeah," I replied, surprised by the sudden shift in conversation. Mikhail pulled out a cigarette but put it back immediately, noticing the seller's disapproving glance from behind the counter. "It happened 17 years ago," he began, "back when I still had a best friend. In many ways, Andre and I were complete opposites. School came easily to me, while his report card was filled with C's and the occasional B. I was a skinny kid compared to my classmates, while he was on the basketball team and could do more pull-ups than anyone else in class. I kept to myself, while he was the life of every party. But we shared one common passion: seeking out adventures, no matter the cost. It started when we were kids, the day we opened the door to the basement of our house, becoming the first visitors in 50 years. Well, except for the rats and cockroaches. As the years passed and we grew older, our desire for adventure remained. One day, we stumbled upon a barely visible path in the forest that seemed to lead directly to the city in the north. We could not resist following it. The midday sun filtered through the trees as we trudged along, occasionally losing sight of the path. There were boot prints in the soft, dried mud. It had rained 3 days ago, and it seemed these tracks had been left behind then. About 20 minutes later, the path led us to the edge of the forest, where we found a small clearing. In the center stood an old village house. Well, stood might be too strong a word. The house was leaning to one side, and every window pane was shattered. This once humble dwelling, where a forester or some local hermit had likely lived, had become another grim reminder that time spares nothing. The inside of the hut was no better. The wind howled softly through the empty window frames. The floor was littered with shards of glass, and spiders darted in the corners. Piles of half-rotted junk, draped in cloth torn to shreds, slowly decayed against the walls. The air smelled of damp, rotting wood, and despite the drafts, it felt suffocating. Dirty boot prints crisscrossed the floor, a sign that we weren't the first to explore this place. The stark contrast between the sunlit clearing and the dark, decaying interior made me feel uneasy. We split off to explore different rooms. As I shuffled my feet over the crumbling plaster, I noticed an old, sagging sofa with springs sticking out. I could not help but wonder who sat on it last and how many years ago. Abandoned buildings always had that effect on me. They sparked a wild sense of imagination. Then I heard my friend's voice, full of surprise. "Holy shit, Nick, come here and look at this." Andre was crouched down, staring at something on the floor. "There's a door to the cellar here, and the tracks lead straight to it." He felt around for the handle and tugged the door open. It creaked, reluctant at first, but eventually gave way. "I can't see anything. It's pitch black down there." We did not have flashlights, so we hesitated for a moment. We were young, adventurous, eager to explore. I decided to go first. The stairs groaned under my weight, loud enough to echo through the entire forest. "What's going on?" Andre called from above. "Hell if I know," I replied, waiting for my eyes to adjust to the darkness. And then I heard it, the sound that sent a chill down my spine, a rustling from the far corner. You might have thought it was just a homeless person seeking shelter, but what made my blood run cold was not the noise. It was the unmistakable sound of a metal chain clinking. In the dim light, the vague shape of a figure emerged, something that looked human, but damn, I should have run right then, instead of just standing there, frozen. So, it wasn't a human. Mikhail fiddled nervously with the lighter in his hands, biting his lip, clearly uneasy. It was hard to believe, but he was not exaggerating. Anatomically, it was a human. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head. But when it stepped into the light, I could not fathom that something like that could exist anywhere in the world. The creature was naked, covered in mud from head to toe. It was more like a skin-covered skeleton. Its hair hung in long, matted strands, and a heavy chain was fastened around its ankle, clinking with every step. Before I rushed upstairs, I could not help but glance into its eyes. What did I see there? Fear, raw animal fear mixed with aggression, and something else. That look, it's something I will never forget. It will haunt my nightmares for the rest of my life. We bolted out of the house, like our lives depended on it, and just as we made it outside, the creature let out a scream, inhuman and high-pitched, before it morphed into an eerie squeal. Ignoring the shopkeeper, Mikhail pulled out a cigarette and lit it. I noticed how his hands trembled as he brought the lighter to his face. What happened next is a blur. Somehow, we found ourselves back at my house. On the way, I told Andre exactly what I had seen. He worked for the police and had been in plenty of dangerous situations before. He processed things faster than I did. The chain around the creature's leg suggested it had been kept captive, maybe for ransom, or perhaps just for someone's sick pleasure. Who knows? There were plenty of perverts at that time. Then it hit me. What else I had seen in its eyes, besides fear, despair, and a flicker of fading hope. Hope that someone might rescue it from that nightmare. The last time I saw that same look was in the eyes of dying soldiers when I worked as a doctor in a war zone. It was pure horror. By nightfall, Andre decided to leave, to assemble a team and go back to the hut. I could not sleep, of course. He promised to update me as soon as the operation was finished. After finishing his cigarette, Mikhail took one other from the pack and lit it, his movements automatic. I called him the next morning, but there was no answer. By midday, when I still had not heard from him, I contacted his entire precinct to raise the alarm. They were reluctant to give me any answers, and if I had not been Andre's friend, someone everyone knew, they would have just sent me packing. By evening, when the workday was over and the atmosphere was a bit more relaxed, an investigator with the dramatic name of Alarian finally spoke to me. After making me promise repeatedly to keep everything he said quiet, especially around his superiors, he told me what he knew. Did I want to know more? Yes. Did that make me feel any better? Not in the slightest. The first group had maintained radio contact with the station from the car. Since they could not drive into the forest, they made their way on foot to the hut. The signalman stayed behind in the car, monitoring the radios. As the group approached the hut, the connection started to fail. They radioed in that they had entered the house, but after that, all they could hear was static and nothing was clear. About 2 minutes later, the signalman reported hearing gunshots. Then, through the static, the sound of him loading his pistol was faintly audible. A few minutes after that, he said he saw something between the trees in the distance. Even the crackling static could not mask the panic in his voice. His speech became slurred, and amidst the general chaos, you could hear him muttering what sounded like a prayer. Whatever he saw out there, it had thrown him into a state of panic. Someone who had been trained for years to keep his cool in any situation. He did not even attempt to start the car or leave it. He just kept repeating, over and over, that we had woken the devil. The connection cut off abruptly after a single shot. The second group arrived early the next morning. At the edge of the forest, they found a police car, the same one that the first group had arrived in. The car was completely empty. There were no bullet holes in the cabin, no blood, and no sign of the signalman. It was as if the shot they heard from the station had not come from the gun, but from something that had yanked the car and its occupant into another dimension. Inside the hut, chaos reigned. Old furniture was tossed around haphazardly. The floor was soaked with blood, and shell casings were scattered everywhere. The walls were riddled with bullet holes, but what exactly did the group encounter in that hut that turned 4 armed men into a bloody mess? No one knows. What really shook the group, however, was the scene in the basement. In the center of the dark room were 2 neatly folded piles. One contained the dismembered body parts of the murdered policemen, while the other held gnawed bones. The creature had not just killed them, it had also eaten them. The prisoner had vanished. All that remained in the basement was the chain he had been held on, and an old, foul-smelling mattress, but next to the mattress, in a pool of blood, the detectives found a human foot. The wounds on it were jagged and appeared to be bite marks, but they were strange. It looked as though the prisoner had chewed off his own foot in a desperate escape attempt. A bloody trail led from the foot to the stairs, but it disappeared there, impossible to follow further. The case was never solved. At first, the newspapers were full of the story, but soon it was silenced. Today, the file is likely buried so deep in the police archives that you would never be able to find it, even if you tried. We left the cafe. I thanked Mikhail for the fascinating story, forcing my voice to sound lighthearted. It was hard to believe that just an hour ago, we had been talking about work, and I was sure I would go home thinking about how to finish the task he'd given me as quickly and easily as possible. Now, my mind could not process anything that was not connected to the strange, horrifying tale. As we were about to leave, Mikhail spoke again. "There's something that still bothers me," he said. "Those dirty footprints Andre and I saw led to the basement, but I did not see any footprints going the other way. The creature on the chain could not have left them. It did not have shoes. So when I went down to the basement, there must have been someone else there. Someone who later gave the task force a warm welcome. Someone who took Andre." Mikhail took a deep breath, exhaled loudly, and added quietly, "And he knows me by sight." Fuck it, I'll contribute. I've pre-typed all this into Notepad, and I'm going to make multiple posts. It's a bit long-winded, and honestly kind of boring compared to some people's stories. For some backstory, me and my entire family believe we're haunted by a ghost. Don't necessarily think it's suspicious, and there's been a few things that made me think it may even be looking out for us. There is my parents. Mom is from Australia, and my dad is from Canada. There is me and 2 older sisters. Oldest sister was born in Canada. Me and the middle sister, born in Australia. We think it haunts specifically my dad, as it seems to follow him around. A lot of these stories I've heard from my family members, so they're lacking in details. Sorry about that. The first 2 are things that happened to me, at least the ones I remember clearly. First thing that happened. Be me, probably 14 or so. It must have been 2010, because I was playing with an iPod Touch I'd gotten for my birthday. House is 2 stories tall. Bottom floor is parents' room, living area, kitchen, etc. Top level is 3 kids' bedrooms, including mine, and a bathroom and office. Only me and Mom were home. I'd just gotten something from the kitchen and seen my mom sitting in the living room reading. Walk upstairs and go into my room. I'm supposed to be cleaning my room, but I'm just sitting on my bed playing doodle jump or something. My room has an L shape, and above my bed there are no shelves or anything. Bed is next to the door, so my back is to the door, but it is kinda to the side, so I can see it in my peripheral. Out of nowhere, a balled up sock hits me in the back of the head with force as if thrown. I turn around, no one there. Go downstairs. Mom has not moved. Has been maybe 5 minutes since I last saw her. I ask her if she was just upstairs, but she just looks confused and keeps reading. There's also no way she could have gone up the stairs without me noticing. The 2 steps from the top has a very distinct creak that you can't avoid, and the whole staircase is pretty creaky. Go back to my room, extremely confused. Like I said, no shelves above the bed, so the sock could not have fallen from something. And also it hit me in the back of the head, hard, for a sock anyway. Come to the conclusion that the family ghost was annoyed I wasn't cleaning my room like I was supposed to be. Next story. The details about the creaky stairs come into this one. Be me, maybe 15 or so at this point. Home alone after school, so probably 3:30 p.m. Sitting in my sister's room because she had a TV on her wall. I think I was watching Jeopardy, not the quiz show, a teen show about aliens or something. All of a sudden, I hear someone start to walk up the stairs. Again, very confused, because I'm certain I'm home alone and I would have heard the door open. They are very slowly and very heavily walking up the stairs. I hear them reach the landing. Staircase is L-shaped, which means they're halfway up. The steps continue up, but go on for way too long, just too many steps, and they never reach the creaky step second from the top. Eventually, I'm freaking out, so I just yell, "Leave me alone." The steps instantly stop. Sitting there, staring at my sister's bedroom door, waiting. Nothing. After a while I build up courage and sprint down the stairs. Grab my dogs from the backyard and go wait at the top of the driveway with them for comfort. My neighbor, who was this weird 30-year-old lady named Sharon, comes over to see what's going on. I tell her the truth. She suggests her coming inside with me until my parents get home. I agree. When we go inside, she starts yelling stuff like, "We're not scared of you," etc. Get annoyed because I don't want her to piss it off. Nothing happens after that. Those are the 2 that happened specifically to me. There were a few others, but I kinda dismissed them because I was a kid. Like one time laying in bed, and I see faces coming out of my wall. I also had an imaginary friend named George who had a sword. Now personally, I think that was just me being a kid because I've got a very specific memory from being in preschool and getting jealous that a friend of mine had an imaginary friend, so I invented one, and George was one of the only names that I knew. However, I found out years later from my mom that my dad also had an imaginary friend as a kid, also named George, who also had a sword, and apparently, I used to sit alone in my room talking to someone. This is one I actually witnessed a few times. The TV in my parents' bedroom would randomly turn on, but not all the way. It was like it went to a loading screen where it was just grey, but you could hear it was powered on. This would never happen if my dad was home. Only happened to my mom, and maybe once or twice to me if I happened to be walking through. Another thing. Me, my mom, and middle sister are chatting in the living room. From the living room, there is a glass sliding door to the deck, and at the other end of the deck is a door to my parents' room. There are light switches for the deck in the room we're in and in my parents' room. As we are talking, the deck lights randomly turn on, but not from the switch in the room we're in. After a few seconds, they turn off again. This repeats maybe twice. Me, mom, and sister are just looking at each other in bewilderment and slight fear. At this point though, we are all familiar with creepy events, so just ignore it. My dad has lots of stories, which is kind of why we think it's connected to him. When I was maybe 9, my dad moved with my oldest sister to Canada for her to attend high school. While he was there, we did not experience anything paranormal in Australia, but he experienced a lot. Dad and oldest sister are staying in Grandma's house. I think she may have been in a nursing home at this time, or maybe living at their cabin on the lake. Either way, she was not there. Sister was out with friends. Dad was at the pub or something. They both get home at relatively the same time, around midnight I guess. Dad sees my sister go downstairs to bed, and as he's getting ready for bed, he sees a blonde woman walk into the bathroom and close the door. Assumes this is a friend of my sister's who regularly stayed over. She is in the bathroom for a while, so Dad just pisses in the backyard, then goes to bed. In the morning, he asks my sister where her friend was. My sister is just confused. No one stayed over that night. Mystery blonde woman is unaccounted for. Very close to that previous event, my sister was in bed trying to fall asleep. She hears someone slowly walk down the stairs and into her room. Her bedroom was in the basement. She's got a plastic rubbish bag next to her bed. Hears the steps walk up to it, then the crinkle of them stepping on it. She is under her blankets, panicking. After a while, a weight presses down onto her bed, then disappears. Not like the weight lifted, but as if it simply disappeared. Pretty sure she was home alone that night, but not certain. Cousins, sisters, and friends are having a party by a family-owned cabin on the lake. Cabin was owned by an uncle or something, someone I've never met. We've got a big family, and they are very influential in this part of Canada, politics, etc. The rules of the party were that no one was allowed inside the cabin. It was all locked up by my dad. Everyone is just partying in the yard down to the waterline. Dad was hanging around when he sees someone in the upstairs window. Asks my cousin who is in there. He says shouldn't be anyone. Dad goes to check. Doors are all still locked. Clears the houses. No one there. Bedroom that the window was in is empty. Shrugs it off and goes back to the party. Happens again. Rinse and repeat. Throughout the night, he keeps seeing someone in the window. Ends up ignoring it, assuming it's the family ghost. This one is very sparse in detail because Dad refuses to talk about it. This was when my mom and Dad first got married, before having any kids. Dad comes home from a night out, sees Mom levitating about 2 feet above the bed. Confused and scared, he walks up and pushes her back down. She wakes up, sees him, and says hi, completely unaware of what just happened. He only told her like 20 years later. As for why I think this ghost might be friendly, there are multiple times in my life where I should have died, but it felt like something took control of my body or pushed me, and I narrowly avoided death. That's all I can remember for now. Since moving out of home, 2015, I have never experienced anything paranormal. Not while alone anyway. Definitely some creepy weird things, but they can probably be explained away, as they were all in public, and so minor I've forgotten them. Guess it wouldn't hurt to share some interesting stories from when I worked at a gas station. See, I started out working night shifts from 9 PM to 7 AM, and it was my first ever overnight job. I was actually there for a pretty long time before anything truly weird started happening. I mean, aside from the usual druggies wandering in kind of thing. Oh yeah, the gas station was located in a shitty part of town. Anyways, I'll start with the time I almost got fired. So, I'm about 2 months into working in the store. I've seen pretty much anything you're going to say on an average night, or so I thought. So I'm standing behind the counter, and a regular comes in. He's a pretty chill guy, and he comes in 2 or 3 times at a night to get himself more blunts. Bro smokes hella weed all day every day. This is his second time coming in tonight. Tells me there's a dude out front talking to himself and acting really weird for whatever reason. I tell him I'll check it out in a minute. I need a smoke anyway. Tells me I don't understand. This guy has been in the same spot since he left earlier, easily 2 hours ago. The fuck you mean? So I'm like, okay, well, let's go out there. And bro tells me no fucking way, lol, and runs off like a jackrabbit in the desert, getting gunned down by a fighter jet. He left quickly, is what I'm saying. So I go out there, and this guy pretty much looks like Denzel Washington in that movie Unbreakable. Same crazy hair. He was wearing a brown leather jacket, which actually looked pretty cool, and some faded jeans. Both his jacket and jeans had dozens of pockets, and as he is standing there, This whole time, he's going through his pockets, over and over, mumbling about how he can't find it, or it's running out. Weird shit, basically. I tried talking to him a couple of times. He asked if I had it. I don't know why, but I told him yes. Oh shit. This motherfucker just snapped and started tripping out. I shit you not, he pulled a gas hose off of the pump. Those things are meant to break away, but not from people, from cars and shit. The magnets are way too strong for people alone. He starts dragging it towards the main road and hurled it into the street. Just whipped it out, with cars going by, even a cop. Well, the cop stopped and took him to jail. Apparently, it wasn't paranormal. This was the summer, bath salts were huge, but still crazy. The reason I almost got fired was because I told him I had it or whatever, and I told my boss about it. I have another one about an entire store full of people experiencing some crazy shit if you want more. So, here is my experience up around the Belulah area of Colorado. Was hiking through the local mountains park in the nearby mountain town of Belulah. Beautiful area, especially during the spring. Originally had started hiking with friends, but had gotten separated somewhere along one of the forks. All trails lead back to the entrance if you go for long enough, so no biggie. Carrying a fairly light sack, just with some water and trail mix. We did not plan on spending the entire day up in Belulah. The trail starts to get more worn as I trek on, like many had not been this far on the path in a good 5 years or so. It then opens up into a large open space with a rodeo arena, all decayed and falling apart. Like a moron, I climb up the tower in the middle of the bleachers and begin to look around. The place looks ransacked, the cabinets and tables haphazardly flung across the room. Walk over to one of the chairs, still seated toward the window to the arena. See a shed off in the distance, not just the shed, but someone limping into it. I say limping, but it was more of this jerking, awkward walk. The torso of the person slumping forward and backward, like their spine was being held together with rubber bands. Decide maybe to go look at the shed, see if the person needs my help. Get an immediate flight or fight response as I get closer to the shed. I can hear whoever is in there grunting and mumbling. Peer into the door and see nothing, except where the floorboards have been ripped up and a hole has been dug into the floor. Walk back away from the area, back the way I came, as I can now hear cracking sounds coming from the shed. Just guttural cracking sounds. Sorry, I have no photos. My phone had died earlier on the hike. I just saw a bizarre creature in the woods. I'm not sure what to think about this, and I swear to God I am not making this up. Today, I was walking in the woods to find the good clay and to get to the stream. I need to pass through this one area with lots of low evergreen plant things that carpet the entire forest floor. Suddenly, I heard a bunch of movement and I figured that it was a bird or a squirrel running through the plants, but I began to feel an unreasoning fear and thought that maybe it was a rabid fox. I watched it move back and forth through the undergrowth for a while, catching flashes of pink skin here and there. Then it just ran right past my leg, within reaching distance. It was literally a fucking boob with feet. It ran on its giant goddamn feet, and as it did, the eyeless boob was shaking like it was on a power tool. I shamelessly admit that I screamed in pure terror and jumped onto a log, but this bizarre thing just ran past me, back into the undergrowth. I stayed where I was for a while, and saw it run back the direction it came from, and then disappeared back into the deeper forest. I ran back to my house and drew this picture of what I saw. I never actually believed in cryptids before, but I am now convinced that magic is real, and I just saw some sort of eldritch horror. What the fuck is this? Is there any record of an eyeless boob with 2 large feet? It stood about 6 or 8 inches tall and was unbelievably fast. What the fuck is this thing?